When Congresswoman Maxine Waters walked into a federal hearing and publicly branded Senator John Kennedy a white supremacist, she expected a partisan coronation. Instead, she walked blindly into a televised execution of her 5-year political career, orchestrated by a country lawyer armed with nothing but a manila folder of her own public records. When Congresswoman Maxine Waters walked into a joint Senate-House hearing and called Senator John Kennedy a white supremacist from a slave state, called Donald Trump the most corrupt criminal president in history, and called America a country built on the bones of black ancestors, she expected the entire Democratic caucus to rally behind her. They did, for about 12 minutes. Then Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, picked up his phone, walked out of the hearing room, and didn't come back. The hearing is about to start, and the woman they call Auntie Maxine is about to learn what happens when public records meet a country lawyer with nothing to lose. The manila folder was 3/4 of an inch thick, off-white, the kind every senator carries to every hearing, and inside it were exactly 41 documents, each one a public record, each one bearing a date and a docket number and a citation that any reporter in the room could verify on a federal database within 90 seconds. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana had not brought a yellow legal pad to this hearing, had not brought a pocket notebook, had not brought a calculator or a chart or a prop of any kind, because he had decided 4 weeks earlier that for this particular witness, Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California, the longest-serving black woman in Congress, the woman who had built a 5-year career on the proposition that any criticism of her was racism by another name, there was only one weapon that could not be deflected, dismissed, or shouted over the public record. And now, sitting 12 feet from her in the cavernous hearing room of the Senate Hart Building, with Senator Ted Cruz on his left, Representative James Comer in the chairman's seat, Representatives Jamie Raskin and Jasmine Crockett at the witness table flanking Waters, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries seated against the back wall, checking his phone the way leaders check their phones when they suspect the meeting is about to go badly, Kennedy opened the folder to the first page and waited for Maxine Waters to give him an opening. She had been giving every Republican who crossed her path since 1991. She gave it to him in the first 60 seconds. The hearing room was packed, reporters from every major network, a Capitol police officer stationed at each door, a line of spectators that stretched halfway down the hall outside. Congresswoman Maxine Waters had been summoned to testify about her role in arranging a federal bailout for one United Bank, a bank where her own husband had served on the board and held stock, and the longest-serving black woman in Congress did not get summoned to testify quietly. 6 members on the dais and at the witness table, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats. Chairman James Comer of Kentucky banged the gavel. This joint committee will come to order. Today we are examining federal bailout oversight from the 2008 financial crisis and questions of congressional ethics related to those bailouts. Our witness is the Honorable Maxine Waters, former chair of the House Financial Services Committee. Congresswoman Waters, you are recognized for an opening statement. Maxine Waters stood up. She did not need to stand up. Witnesses customarily delivered opening statements seated. But she stood up because Maxine Waters did everything standing up. She had been a sitting member of Congress since 1991, and she had spent the entirety of those 35 years discovering that the camera loved her better when she was on her feet. She adjusted her wig, a dark, perfectly styled affair that had become as much a part of her public persona as the chants she was about to deliver, and she took a deep breath, and she did not even bother to begin with the topic of the hearing. Mr. Chairman, before I address the so-called subject of this hearing, I have something to say to the American people, because what is really happening in this room today has nothing to do with TARP. It has nothing to do with 2008. It has everything to do with a Republican Party that cannot win elections fairly, and so it tries to destroy black women in public service." Her voice rose. The room recognized the cadence. The progressive section of the gallery, about 40 people, most of them wearing buttons that said "Anti-Maxine Forever," leaned forward. "I am sick and tired of being lectured about ethics by senators from states that lynched my ancestors. I am sick and tired of a Republican Party that protects the most corrupt, most racist, most criminal president in American history, Donald Trump, while attacking a black woman who has spent 35 years fighting for her community." She turned and pointed directly at Kennedy. The cameras caught the gesture from 3 angles. "Senator Kennedy, you shield him, you protect him, you defend him, and you have the audacity to question my ethics. The audacity to sit there in your folksy aw shucks Louisiana drawl and pretend you care about black communities while your party works every day to roll back the voting rights my ancestors died for." She turned back to the cameras. The gallery was on its feet now. 3 women had begun to chant, "Impeach 45 inches," the rhythm Maxine had taught them. "This country was built on the bones of my ancestors. America's wealth is black wealth that was stolen. America's prosperity is black prosperity that was denied. And until this country reckons with that history, until people like Donald Trump are held accountable, there will be no peace in this nation. Impeach 45, impeach him again, and every Republican who enabled him should be investigated, prosecuted, and removed from public office." Jasmine Crockett stood up beside her and applauded. Jamie Raskin nodded with the solemn gravity of a constitutional law professor witnessing a moment he intended to cite later. Hakeem Jeffries in the back of the room did not look up from his phone. The chant in the gallery continued for 15 seconds. Comer let it run. He had presided over enough hearings to know that you do not interrupt a witness's opening statement, even when the witness is using it to deliver a campaign speech, because the Republican on your committee does not need your help to handle what comes next. When the noise finally settled, Comer leaned into his microphone. "Senator Kennedy, you are recognized for questions." Kennedy did not stand up. Kennedy never stood up. He adjusted his smudged glasses. He took out a handkerchief. An old white handkerchief washed so many times, the monogram his grandmother had stitched on, it was almost invisible. And he cleaned the lenses slowly, the way a man cleans his glasses when he is in no particular hurry to begin and wants the room to understand that. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman." He turned toward Waters. His voice was as soft as a porch conversation on a summer evening in Madison Parish. "Congresswoman Waters, that was a powerful opening. Truly, you're a passionate woman, and passion is a gift from the Lord. My Mima used to say, passion without facts is just noise, but passion with facts is a hurricane. I'd like to talk about facts today. Ma'am, with the chairman's permission, I'd like to ask you some questions about your own record before we move on to the president's record. Is that all right? With the chairman? The senator may proceed, Comer said. Raskin's microphone clicked on. Mr. Chairman, I object. The objection arrived exactly when Kennedy had expected it to arrive. Kennedy had told Cruz before the hearing that Raskin would object within the first 90 seconds. Cruz had bet him a coffee that it would be sooner. Raskin had taken the longer estimate. This hearing was noticed as an oversight hearing on TARP bailouts. The senator's apparent intention to conduct a personal examination of the witness's character is not within the scope of this hearing's authorization. Under Rule 11 of the Joint Committee Procedures, questioning must be confined to the noticed subject matter. I am formally objecting to any line of questioning that strays from TARP oversight into matters of personal conduct, personal residence, or personal financial relationships unrelated to the documented bailout. It was a beautiful objection, procedurally precise, constitutional in its framing, delivered with the polish of a man who had taught federal rules of evidence at Harvard for the better part of 2 decades. Kennedy did not raise his voice. "Mr. Raskin, with all due respect, and you and I are both lawyers, so I know you'll appreciate the precision of this. The public record shows that one of the largest single bank TARP allocations in 2008 went to one United Bank, a small bank that received $12 million after the personal intervention of the witness, whose husband at the time was a board member and a stockholder. That's not personal examination. That is exactly what oversight of TARP looks like. Now, you went to Harvard Law, and I went to the University of Virginia and Oxford and Vanderbilt, so we both learned the same federal rules of evidence, and the federal rules say that direct evidence of a witness's involvement in the subject matter of the investigation is admissible. So, unless you'd like to amend the federal rules of evidence by interjection, which last time I checked is not a recognized procedure, I'd like to proceed." The room made a small sound. Not laughter exactly, the precursor to it. Raskin opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Proceed." Cruz, sitting next to Kennedy, made a small note on the legal pad in front of him. Coffee one he would collect later. Kennedy opened the manila folder. "Page 1 of my folder, Congresswoman, is the House Ethics Committee statement of alleged violation regarding one United Bank, filed August 10, 2010, case number 201-0-364. I'd like to read from it word for word, so that anyone watching at home can verify what I am saying against the public record. I am quoting directly from the House Ethics Committee's own document, page 7, paragraph 3. Kennedy's voice was level. He read the way a court clerk reads, without inflection, without emphasis, allowing the words themselves to do whatever work they were going to do. The committee finds that in September 2008, Congresswoman Waters directly contacted the Office of the Treasury Secretary to arrange a meeting between Treasury officials and executives of one United Bank. At the time of this intervention, the Congresswoman's husband, Sidney Williams, served on the board of one United Bank and held stock in the bank that had recently lost substantial value due to the collapse of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. He paused. Let the sentence settle. Following the meeting arranged by Congresswoman Waters, one United Bank received $12 million in Troubled Asset Relief Program funds, despite a federal regulatory finding that the bank operated, quote, without effective underwriting standards and engaged in, quote, speculative investment practices. He looked up. Congresswoman, that's not me saying it. That's the House Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives where you serve. The chair of that committee at the time was a Democrat. I just want everyone watching to be clear about that. Maxine's hand came down on the witness table. I was exonerated of those charges. The Ethics Committee cleared me in 2012. That report was dismissed. You are reading from a document that has been legally dismissed. Kennedy waited for her to finish. When she had, he spoke even more quietly than before. Ma'am, with respect, you weren't exonerated. The case was dismissed because 6 of the 10 ethics panel members recused themselves over questions of partiality. The substance of the allegations was never adjudicated on the merits. The case fell apart because the investigator's impartiality was challenged, not because the underlying facts were disproved. Cruz leaned into his microphone. Mr. Chairman, if the senator will yield for 30 seconds, I want to clarify the legal record as someone who has practiced law before the Supreme Court of the United States. I want to be precise about what dismissal means in an ethics proceeding. A dismissal due to investigator recusal is not a finding of innocence. It is a procedural termination. The statement of alleged violation that Senator Kennedy is reading from was never withdrawn. It remains a public record. The factual allegations contained in it were never refuted on the merits. They were never even challenged on the merits. Anyone watching at home can pull this document from the House Ethics Committee's public archives in approximately 90 seconds. It is available right now. It has been available for 15 years. Kennedy nodded. Thank you, Senator Cruz. The facts in that report, that the Congresswoman called the Treasury Secretary, that her husband held stock, that the bank received $12 million, that no other small minority-owned bank received personal congressional intervention with the Secretary of the Treasury. Those facts were never disputed. Not in 2010, not in 2012, not today. Crockett's microphone clicked on loudly. This is a racist proceeding. You are two white men from southern states attacking a black woman based on a 10-year-old report that was dismissed. This is exactly the kind of attack that has been used against black women in public service for generations. Kennedy turned slowly to face her. Not angry, just turned. Congresswoman Crockett, I appreciate your passion. I do. But I want to address what you just said directly. You called this a racist proceeding. The chairman of this committee is James Comer, a Republican from Kentucky, not a slave state, and not a man who has ever been credibly accused of racism in his entire public career. The facts I'm reading are from the House Ethics Committee, which in 2010 was led by a Democrat. The investigators who brought the original complaint were from the Office of Congressional Ethics, which is a nonpartisan body specifically designed to be insulated from partisan politics, and the allegations involve a federal bank bailout, where a member of Congress' husband held stock in the bank that received the federal money. If asking about that is racist, Congresswoman, then the entire concept of congressional oversight is racist, which I don't believe you actually mean to argue. He paused, then he added something that made the room shift in their seats. And Congresswoman Crockett, I'd like to say one more thing on this point because I think it matters. The bank in question was a black-owned bank. The House Ethics Committee at the time was investigating whether one specific member of Congress used her position to ensure federal money went to a bank her husband had a financial interest in, while other black-owned banks did not receive comparable assistance. This isn't an attack on black banking. It's an examination of whether one member of Congress's family benefited at the direct expense of other black-owned institutions. There were dozens of small minority banks in trouble in 2008. Only one of them got a personal call from a sitting Congresswoman to the Treasury Secretary. Only one of them had a board member married to that Congresswoman. Crockett opened her mouth. She had two responses in mind. Neither of them worked when she ran them through her head one more time. She closed her mouth. She did not speak again for the next 11 minutes. Kennedy turned to a fresh page in his folder. Page 2. Federal Election Commission filings for your campaign committee, Citizens for Waters. For the period 2006 through 2023. Public records available on the FEC website. Anyone can verify what I am about to read. According to FEC filings, and these are public records, anyone watching can pull them up at FEC.gov right now. Your campaign committee has paid your daughter Karen Waters approximately $750,000 between 2006 and 2023. Kennedy held up the printed FEC summary. The payments are categorized as compensation for slate mailer operations. For people watching who don't know what that means, slate mailers are political advertisements sent to voters before elections, usually 2 or 3 pieces of cardstock with a list of endorsed candidates. The industry standard rate for slate mailer operations in California is approximately $5,000 to $15,000 per election cycle. That's the going rate. Anyone can verify it by calling any political consulting firm in Sacramento. Your campaign has paid your daughter for the same service between $40,000 and $60,000 per cycle. sometimes more. Plus, according to the same FEC filings, your committee currently owes her an additional $18,000. The unpaid balance has been on the books for several years. He turned to Comer. Mr. Chairman, I believe the Oversight Committee staff completed a review of slate mailer operations in California's 43rd District last year. Do you have those findings available? Comer reached into his own folder. I do. The Oversight Committee staff compared payments to Karen Waters with payments to comparable slate mailer operations across the state of California, including operations run by other Democratic members of Congress, other Republican members of Congress, and independent consultants. Karen Waters' company, Progressive Connections, received between 400% and 700% above the median market rate for equivalent services. There is no public-facing infrastructure for the company, no website, no listed offices, no publicly identified employees. The company exists primarily as a payment recipient. Kennedy nodded. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He turned back to Maxine. Congresswoman, the question I have for you is straightforward. Why did your campaign committee pay your daughter 4 to 7 times the market rate for political services from a company that has no public-facing operations? Because the people who donated to your campaign, many of them small-dollar donors from your district, many of them on fixed incomes, they donated under the assumption that their money would fund political activity to support your re-election, not transfer payments to your family. Maxine leaned into her microphone. Her voice had the practiced fury of a woman who had been delivering this exact response for 15 years. My daughter has done valuable work for our community. She is a hard-working black woman entrepreneur. You are attacking a black woman entrepreneur for daring to run a business. This is what the Republican Party does. They attack black excellence wherever they find it. Kennedy waited. I'm not questioning whether your daughter is a hard worker. I'm questioning whether 400 to 700% above market rate is a reasonable expense for a federal campaign committee, particularly when the company doing the work has no public presence, no listed employees, and is owned by the candidate's daughter. That S not racism. That S accounting, and accounting doesn't have a race. Raskin, who had been quietly listening, made one more attempt. Mr. Chairman, payments to family members are not illegal under federal campaign finance law if the work is legitimate and the compensation is reasonable. Mr. Raskin, Kennedy said, you're absolutely right that they are not per se illegal, and I want to be clear with the American people about that. Nothing I'm reading today suggests that Congresswoman Waters has committed a crime. The question before this committee isn't whether anything criminal happened. The question is ethics and oversight. And when a member of Congress pays her daughter 4 to 7 times the market rate from money donated by constituents, the constituents have a right to ask whether their donations are funding political activity or family enrichment. That's not a criminal question. It's an ethics question, which is exactly what this hearing is authorized to examine. Raskin had no follow-up. He looked down at his notes. The notes did not have an answer. In the back of the room, Hakeem Jeffries finally looked up from his phone. He had been pretending to read text messages for the better part of 40 minutes now. He leaned forward to his microphone, the only time he would speak during the hearing. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a statement for the record. Congresswoman Waters has been a tireless advocate for her community for 35 years. She is one of the most respected members of the Democratic caucus. While I respect Senator Kennedy's right to ask questions, I want it on the record that the Democratic caucus stands with Congresswoman Waters, and we view this line of questioning as an inappropriate distraction from the actual topic of this hearing. It was a leader's statement, calculated, defensive. Notice what it did not contain any specific defense of any specific fact. Jeffries had defended the witness. He had not defended the records, Kennedy noticed. Leader Jeffries, I appreciate that statement. And I want to be clear. I'm not questioning Congresswoman Waters' commitment to her community. I'm asking specific questions about specific public records. If you or any member of the Democratic caucus has factual evidence that the FEC filings I just cited are inaccurate, that the payments didn't happen, that the dollar amounts are wrong, that the relationship to Karen Waters is misrepresented, I would very much like to hear it. Because the entire premise of my questioning depends on the accuracy of the public record. And if the public record is wrong, I need to know. He waited. He gave Jeffries time. 5 seconds. 8 seconds. 12 seconds. I'll take the silence as confirmation that the facts are accurate. Jeffries did not respond. He returned his attention to his phone. The phone was not actually displaying anything important. The phone was a place for his eyes to go. The entire nation just watched the House Minority Leader defend Maxine Waters by not defending a single fact. He vouched for her character. He couldn't vouch for her records. This political fallout is immense, because Kennedy hasn't even gotten to the mansion yet, or the $4,800,000. Kennedy turned the page. The next document in the folder was a printout from the Los Angeles County Recorder's Office. 11 pages, each one stamped with the official seal of the county, each one a public document available to anyone willing to pay $2 at the county recorder's window, or $3 to download from the online archive. Page 7 of the folder. Los Angeles County Real Estate Records. Public documents anyone watching can pull these from the county recorder's office for a nominal fee. The property at the Hancock Park residence, 6 bedrooms, 6.5 bathrooms, approximately 6,000 square ft, was purchased in 1994 for $1.3 million. The current assessed value is approximately $4,800,000. The owners of record are Maxine Waters and Sidney Williams. He set the document down carefully. Hancock Park is in the city of Los Angeles, in the area covered by Los Angeles City Council District 5. According to the most recent United States Census data, which is again public, the median household income in Hancock Park is approximately $187,000 per year. The neighborhood is approximately 81% white, 6% black, 8% Asian, and 5% Hispanic. The crime rate is among the lowest in Los Angeles County. He turned another page. Your congressional district, California's 43rd, covers South Los Angeles, Inglewood, and parts of Watts and Gardena. According to the same census data, the median household income in your district is approximately $44,000 per year. The demographics are approximately 25% black, 58% Hispanic, 6% white. The crime rate is among the highest in Los Angeles County. The poverty rate is approximately 21%, significantly higher than the national average. He looked up from the document. Your residence is approximately 14 miles from the geographic center of your congressional district. It is also outside the boundaries of your congressional district entirely. It has been outside your district for the entirety of your 5-year tenure in Congress. The room was very still. Maxine knew what was coming. Maxine had heard versions of this question for 30 years, and she had a response for every version. She rose to her feet. How dare you? How dare you? You sit there, a white man from a slave state, and you criticize a black woman for the neighborhood she lives in. Do you know how many black women have been denied the right to live in nice neighborhoods? Do you know what redlining did to black families? Do you know what restrictive covenants did to black homeowners in Los Angeles? And now when a black woman has worked hard enough to afford a home in a nice neighborhood, you stand there and attack her for it. Her voice was reaching the upper register now, the voice of the rallies, the voice of Impeach 45, the voice that had made her a hero to the progressive base for nearly a decade. This is racist. This is the same tactic the white power structure has used against black achievement for generations. How dare you live in a nice house? How dare you be successful? I am sick of it. I am done with it. And I will not be silenced by a Republican from Louisiana. Crockett applauded. Raskin nodded slowly. The progressive section of the gallery rose to its feet for the second time in 30 minutes. 3 people chanted anti-Maxine until the chairman gave them to silence. 20 seconds of genuine momentum. The hearing room belonged briefly, completely, to Maxine Waters. Kennedy waited for the noise to settle. When it did, his voice was so quiet that the sound technician at the back of the room had to push a fader up to compensate. Congresswoman, I want to address what you just said directly, because some of what you said is true and some of it isn't, and the difference matters. Redlining was real. The history of black families being systematically denied access to good neighborhoods through restrictive covenants and discriminatory lending practices is real and well documented. I'm not going to argue with you about that history. I'm a country lawyer from Louisiana, but I went to the same civil rights museums you did. I read the same books. I know the history of my state, and I know the history of yours. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 wasn't passed because the previous system was working. What I'm asking is not, why do you live in a nice house? I'm a senator. I live in a nice house too. I'm not begrudging you a comfortable home. Anybody who has worked hard their whole life deserves a comfortable home. That's the American promise, and I believe in it. He set the census document down. What I am asking is something different. For 35 years, you have represented one of the poorest congressional districts in America. The poverty rate in your district has gone up since you took office in 1991. The median household income adjusted for inflation is lower than it was in 1991. Schools in your district have lower graduation rates than they did when you started. The crime rate has fluctuated, but has not meaningfully improved. Homelessness in your district has approximately tripled since you took office. And during those same 35 years, you have lived 14 miles outside that district, in a neighborhood that is wealthy, safe, and 95% not black. The question I'm asking respectfully, with no malice and no political theater, is how does a member of Congress represent a community for 35 years without living in it? How does she know what's happening on the streets she's supposed to serve if she goes home every night to a different zip code? That's not a racial attack. That is a representation question, and it is a question I would ask any member of Congress. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, male, female, Republican, Democrat, who lived outside the district they represented, because I believe the people you represent deserve a representative who lives among them. I'll tell you something personal, Congresswoman. I lived in Madison Parish, Louisiana for most of my adult life. When I went to the state treasurer's office, I kept my house in Madison Parish. When I came to the Senate, I kept my house in Madison Parish. I still spend most weekends there because the people I represent are my literal neighbors. I know their names, not from a constituent database, from church, from the grocery store, from my front porch. They wave at me when I drive past. I wave back. For 35 years, the people of California's 43rd District have not been your neighbors, Congresswoman. They have been your constituents in the abstract, and I'd like to know how that S worked out for them. The race card had been carefully sidestepped. Kennedy had not denied the history. He had refused to be silenced by it, and he had done it without insulting the history or the woman who invoked it. Crockett tried one more time. Her voice was thinner this time. You don't get to lecture us about representation when your party suppresses black votes. Congresswoman Crockett, I'm not lecturing your party. I'm asking one specific member of Congress, one specific question about her own residence and her own district. If you'd like to discuss voting rights in another hearing, I am happy to have that conversation, but right now we are discussing whether a congressperson who lives 14 miles outside her district has effectively served that district. And changing the subject, even to a subject we both care about, is not an answer to the question. Crockett had no response. Raskin had no response. Jeffries had no response, though Jeffries was not looking at the dais anymore. He was looking at his phone, and the screen of his phone was lit up with a text message that the cameras could not see. Page 12 of the folder, Congresswoman Kennedy turned to the next document. This one was a printed transcript with a blue cover sheet stamped Hennepin County District Court. April 17, 2021. Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. During the trial of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd, you traveled to Minnesota and addressed a crowd of protesters in Brooklyn Center on the night of April 17th. I have video of that address. With the chairman's permission, I would like to play 12 seconds of it, just so the American people watching at home can hear it in your own voice. Without objection, Comer said. The hearing room's audio-visual system played the clip. Maxine's voice. 2021. Maxine filled the room. The same voice that had just been shouting about racism. The same voice the cameras had loved. For 35 years, 12 seconds of it. Real. Verifiable from a public news broadcast that had been replayed thousands of times. I hope we get a verdict that says guilty, guilty, guilty. And if we don't, we cannot go away. We've got to stay on the street. We've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business. The clip ended. The room held its breath. Kennedy's voice was very gentle. The judge in the Chauvin trial, Judge Peter Cahill, of the Hennepin County District Court, addressed your comments the next day in open court. I'd like to read his exact words from the trial transcript. Public document, anyone can pull it. State of Minnesota versus Derek Michael Chauvin, court file number 27, CR 2020-12,646. Judge Cahill on the record said, and I am quoting, I'll give you that. Congresswoman Waters may have given you something on appeal that may result in this whole trial being overturned. He set the transcript down. A sitting state district court judge said on the record in open court that your statements during an active criminal trial may have constituted grounds to overturn the conviction of George Floyd's killer. I want to be precise about this, Congresswoman. I am not arguing that you support violence. I do not believe you wanted Derek Chauvin to go free. I do not believe you wanted any harm to come to anyone. What I am reading from is the actual ruling of the actual judge in the actual trial of the man who murdered George Floyd. He said, your words could have led to that man's conviction being overturned. That is a verifiable fact. Anyone watching at home can pull the trial transcript and read it for themselves in less than 2 minutes. Maxine's response was immediate and defiant. I will never apologize for speaking out against police brutality. I am a civil rights icon. I marched with Dr. King's people. I have stood up for Black lives my entire career. Kennedy was even gentler now. The room had not heard him be this gentle yet. Congresswoman, with respect. And I mean this with the deepest respect, because I genuinely believe Dr. King is one of the great Americans, one of the greatest Americans who ever lived. Dr. King taught nonviolent resistance. He was arrested 17 times for nonviolent protest. He never told a crowd to get more confrontational during an active criminal trial. He went to jail rather than escalate. The letter from Birmingham jail is fundamentally a defense of nonviolent direct action, not confrontation, action, specifically nonviolent action. You did not march with Dr. King. I checked the dates. You were a young woman in Street Louis when Dr. King was killed in 1968. Am I not saying you didn't admire him? I'm sure you did. Most Americans of conscience admired Dr. King and continue to admire him. What I am saying is that invoking his legacy to defend telling protesters to get more confrontational during a trial that could have determined whether George Floyd's killer went free, that is not Dr. King's legacy. That is, with respect, the opposite of Dr. King's legacy. The room was very, very quiet. Jamie Raskin, the constitutional law professor who had taught civil rights history at American University Washington College of Law for many years before he came to Congress, did not interject. He could not interject. He knew Kennedy was right about Dr. King, and he knew that Kennedy knew he knew. In the back of the room, Hakeem Jeffries put his phone in his pocket. He stood up. He did not announce that he was leaving. He did not whisper to a staffer. He did not pause to consider the optics. He simply stood up, picked up the leather portfolio he had brought with him, and walked toward the door at the back of the hearing room. His footsteps were loud on the marble floor because the room was so quiet. Every camera in the room caught the movement. 3 networks cut to the shot in real time. The chyron at the bottom of the CNN broadcast read House Minority Leader Jeffries exits hearing during Waters' questioning. The chyron at the bottom of the MSNBC broadcast read the same thing. The chyron at the bottom of Fox News read, Jeffries walks out. He did not come back. Maxine Waters watched her party leader leave the room. The cameras caught her face. There is a particular expression that politicians wear when their leader abandons them in public. It is the expression of a person who has just understood something they did not want to understand. Maxine wore that expression for approximately 3 seconds before she remembered the cameras. And then she put on a different expression. Defiant, chin uprighteous. But the cameras had already captured the first one. Kennedy turned the page in his folder. There was one more document, what Kennedy reveals next. The final document in his folder is not a Republican attack. It's not a Trump talking point. It's a report from a left-wing ethics watchdog, and it might be the most devastating thing any senator has ever read aloud about a sitting Congresswoman. The last document in my folder, Congresswoman, is not from a Republican, it's not from Donald Trump, it's not from Fox News or the Heritage Foundation or any conservative organization. I want everybody watching at home to be very clear about that. Kennedy held up the report. It was about 30 pages with a familiar logo on the cover. It's from CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. He set the report down on the desk. For the people watching who don't know what CREW is, I'd like to take a moment to explain it, because this matters. CREW is a Washington-based ethics watchdog group founded in 2003. It is widely regarded as one of the most prominent left-wing ethics organizations in America. Its founder, Melanie Sloan, was a Democratic congressional staffer for many years. Its current leadership includes former Obama administration ethics officials. Its donors are overwhelmingly Democratic donors, and CREW was specifically created. This is on their own website, in their own founding documents, to investigate ethics violations by Republican members of Congress. CREW is by every measure available a partisan organization. They are on your side, Congresswoman. They are not on my side. They have spent 2 decades investigating Republicans like me. Their stated mission is to hold Republican corruption accountable. They have called for the resignation of dozens of Republicans, including several of my own colleagues. I am not their friend. I am their target. He let that settle. And 5 times, in 2005, in 2006, in 2009, in 2011, and in 2017, CREW has named you to their list of the most corrupt members of Congress, 5 times by a liberal ethics watchdog designed to investigate Republicans, funded by Democrats, run by former Obama administration officials. He looked up from the report. He looked directly at Maxine. I want this to sink in for everyone watching, because this is the part that matters most. When a Republican accuses a Democrat of corruption, the Democrat can credibly say, and you have said this many times in this hearing, this is partisan, this is racist, this is a Republican smear. And sometimes that defense is legitimate. Sometimes Republicans do conduct partisan smears. I'm not naive about my own party's failings, but when a liberal ethics organization, one whose entire purpose for existing is to investigate Republicans, names you as one of the most corrupt members of Congress, not once, not twice, but 5 times across more than a decade, Congresswoman, that is not a partisan smear. That is the verdict of your own side, your ideological allies, the people who should be defending you. They have looked at your record across more than a decade and concluded 5 separate times in 5 separate annual reports that you are among the most corrupt members of the United States Congress. And the question I have for you, and for every Democrat in this room, and for Leader Jeffries, who just walked out, is this, when even your liberal allies cannot defend your record, who exactly is left to defend it other than calling everyone who asks questions a racist? Maxine Waters opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. The teleprompter politician who had shouted her way through 35 years of congressional hearings, the woman who had invented reclaiming my time as a rhetorical weapon, had nothing to say. 8 seconds. 12 seconds. 18 seconds. For the first time in any hearing, in any committee room, in any year of her congressional career, Maxine Waters had run out of words. Crockett, sitting beside her, made one desperate attempt. CREW has been compromised by Republican infiltration in recent years. Kennedy turned to her instantly. Congresswoman Crockett, the most recent CREW designation of Maxine Waters as most corrupt was in 2017, 8 years ago. CREW's leadership at that time included Norman Eisen, President Obama's chief ethics counsel from 2009 to 2011, and the board was approximately 90% Democratic donors. The president of CREW from 2015 to 2021 was Noah Bookbinder, a former Democratic congressional aide who had previously worked at the Department of Justice. Are you suggesting Norman Eisen and Noah Bookbinder were Republican infiltrators? Crockett opened her mouth, closed it. She had nothing. Raskin sat in silence. He had nothing. Maxine finally attempted one last response. This hearing is racist. This is what happens when black women in power refuse to be silenced. Kennedy spoke very gently. The kill line was so soft it barely registered as an attack. Ma'am, with respect, being asked to answer questions about public records is not the same as being silenced. You have spoken more in this hearing than any other witness in any committee hearing this week. You have not been silenced. You have been asked. And the difference between being silenced and being asked is the entire difference between a totalitarian state and a representative democracy. I have asked you about a federal bailout where your husband held stock and which received $12 million after your direct call to the Treasury Secretary. I have asked you about payments to your daughter at 4 to 7 times market rate from money donated by your constituents. I have asked you about a residence 14 miles outside your district, while that district has declined for 35 years on every measurable metric. I have asked you about comments during an active criminal trial that a federal judge said could have overturned the conviction of George Floyd's killer. And I have asked you about 5 separate most corrupt designations from a liberal ethics watchdog whose entire purpose is to investigate Republicans like me. You have not answered any of those questions, Congresswoman. You have called me a racist instead, and that is your right under the First Amendment. which I will defend to my last breath, but it is not an answer. And the American people watching at home can tell the difference between a question and a name. They can see what an answer looks like, and they can see what a deflection looks like, and they can decide for themselves which one you provided here today. He closed the manila folder, he set it on the desk. He folded his hands. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Comer banged the gavel softly. Based on the public records and testimony presented today, this committee will refer the One United Bank matter to the Department of Justice for review. Additional FEC compliance questions will be referred to the House Ethics Committee. The committee stands adjourned. The gavel fell, the room emptied in stages, and the way it emptied was its own kind of testimony. Jasmine Crockett packed up first. She gathered her papers without looking at Maxine, walked toward the side exit, did not stop to speak to a single member of the press. 2 reporters tried to catch her in the hallway. She kept walking. Jamie Raskin took longer. He carefully gathered his notes. He was a man who always carefully gathered his notes, and he leaned toward Maxine and whispered something the cameras did not pick up. It was 4 words long. A lip reader hired by a cable network later identified the words as, "I'm sorry, Auntie Maxine." Then he stood up and walked out through the main doors. Hakeem Jeffries never came back. Ted Cruz turned to Kennedy and shook his hand. The handshake was brief, professional, the handshake of one lawyer acknowledging another lawyer's good day in court. Cruz said one word, "Good." Kennedy nodded. James Comer, from the chairman's seat, gave Kennedy a small nod that said everything that needed to be said. Maxine Waters sat at the witness table for 90 seconds after the gavel. Her staff approached her. She waved them away, then she waved them away again. She stared at the manila folder Kennedy had left on the desk in front of her. Closed now, the 41 documents back inside the brown twine, tied around the outside of the folder. She did not pick it up. She stood, she straightened her jacket, a movement that would have been unconscious in any other circumstance, but that now on camera looked like the gesture of a woman trying to remember how to be the woman she had been when she walked into the room. She walked to the exit. Not the main door, the side door. The door reporters could not easily access, the door her staff had designated as the emergency exit during the pre-hearing security walkthrough that morning. She left through that door. The progressive section of the gallery, which had cheered her opening 40 minutes earlier with chants of Impeach 45, was almost entirely empty. 2 of the original anti-Maxine Forever supporters remained. They did not chant, they did not stand. They watched her go. Outside in the hallway, Hakeem Jeffries was already 3 blocks away. That evening, Senator John Kennedy left his office in the Hart Senate building at 7:30 p.m. He did not go directly to his car. He told his security detail he wanted to walk for a little bit. The detail reluctantly agreed in the way that security details reluctantly agreed to anything that was not on the schedule. He walked west across the National Mall in the cold spring air of early April, past the Capitol Reflecting Pool, past the Ulysses S. Grant Memorial, across 1st Street, then 3rd Street, then 7th, then 12th, then 14th. The long walk west toward the river. He passed the Washington Monument, which was lit up against the dark sky. He passed the World War II Memorial, where a few tourists were still taking photographs. He passed the long reflecting pool with its dark water and its scattered reflections of street lights, until he reached the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. He climbed them slowly. He was 73 years old, and his knees reminded him of it on every step. There were 87 steps in total, and he counted them on the way up, because counting them gave him something to do besides think about Maxine Waters. At the top, he stood for a moment in front of the statue, Lincoln's 16 feet tall marble, looking out across the mall toward the Capitol, where Kennedy had spent the day reading public records to a woman who had called him a white supremacist. Lincoln did not look back at him. Lincoln did not move. Lincoln had been looking out across that mall since 1922, and he would still be looking out across it long after John Kennedy was gone. There were a few tourists, a family from somewhere in the Midwest taking photographs with their phones, a young couple holding hands, neither of them speaking, a college student reading the Gettysburg Address engraved on the south wall of the chamber. Kennedy walked over to the south wall. He read the Gettysburg Address again. He had read it many times in his life. In the 7th grade, when his teacher, Mrs. Robichaux, had made him memorize the whole thing for a recitation. In law school, when one of his professors had used it as an example of perfect rhetorical economy in the Louisiana State Treasurer's office, when he had quoted from it at a Memorial Day event in Shreveport. Tonight he read it slowly, the way you read something you've read your whole life, when you are trying to figure out which part of it applies to you today. His eyes stopped at the last line, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. He thought about Maxine Waters, about the $4,800,000 mansion in Hancock Park, about the daughter S. $750,000, about the one United Bank intervention, about a district in South Los Angeles that had been getting poorer for 35 years, while its representatives slept 14 miles away, in a different zip code, in a different neighborhood, in a different America. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. Lincoln wrote those words in November of 1863. He died for them less than 2 years later, on a Friday night in April, shot in the back of the head while watching a play at Ford S. Theater. Kennedy thought Lincoln died so that Maxine Waters could be elected to Congress. Lincoln died so that a black woman could rise to be chair of the House Financial Services Committee. Lincoln died so that the daughter of a janitor in Street, Louis, Missouri, could become one of the most powerful black women in American political history. And what had she done with it? He walked over to the North Wall. He read the second inaugural address, the hardest speech Lincoln ever gave, the one delivered 6 weeks before he was killed, the one that ended with 7 words that Kennedy had been thinking about all day ever since he had read the crew report on the airplane the night before, with malice toward none, with charity for all. Charity, not anger, not vengeance, not the calling of names, not the deflection of accountability through accusation. Charity. Kennedy stood in front of Lincoln for a long time. The tourists came and went. The marble was cold under the floodlights. Somewhere beyond the columns, a park police officer was making his rounds, and Kennedy could hear the soft tread of his footsteps echoing across the empty plaza. After a while, the country lawyer turned and walked down the 87 steps. He did not say anything to anyone. He did not need to. Lincoln had said it all already, more than 160 years ago in marble, that would still be there when every politician currently serving in Washington had gone home for the last time. The only thing left for any senator from Louisiana to do was to keep showing up with public records, with patience, with the quiet persistence of a country lawyer who believed that government of the people had not yet perished from the earth, and that as long as one widow in South Los Angeles was still waiting for her Congresswoman to come home from Hancock Park, the work was not done. The country lawyer walked back across the mall in the dark toward his car, toward his apartment, toward the morning when he would do it all over again. The Lincoln Memorial stood behind him, with its 16-feet marble man, and its old, hard, true words about a nation that had to be born again and again, and as many times as it took, until the people who claimed to represent the people finally remembered that representation is not a job title, it is a promise. And tonight, in a hearing room in the Senate Hart Building, one senator from Louisiana had asked one congresswoman from California to keep her promise. She had not. But the question had been asked on the public record, where it could not be erased. where it would still be available on a federal database 90 seconds from now, 90 years from now, available to any American who wanted to know what their government had done in their name. Tomorrow, somewhere in South Los Angeles, a woman would read about it in the newspaper, and she would know that someone had finally noticed. If you made it this far, you just watched a country lawyer from Louisiana completely destroy the longest-serving black woman in Congress, using nothing but a manila folder full of public records, while the House Minority Leader walked out of the room, rather than defend her on camera. If you believe public records matter more than political theater, hit that like button, subscribe, because more explosive stories are coming. Comment public record down below, and share this with everyone who has ever wondered why their congressperson doesn't seem to know they exist. God bless the Constitution. God bless Abraham Lincoln. God bless James Comer for chairing the hearing. And God bless the country lawyers who still believe that the public record is the people's record and that no one in power should be allowed to call the truth a smear just because the truth is inconvenient. The hearing is over. The records are filed, and the question Senator Kennedy asked, the question every American watching wanted asked, is now part of the permanent record of the United States Congress, where it cannot be deleted, cannot be denied, and cannot be silenced by calling the man who asked it a racist. The mailman delivered the mail, even when the mail was a manila folder. When the noise of partisan fury finally fades into the silence of the public record, what legacy will our modern politicians actually leave behind for the history books to judge?